boy, okay. Good evening, everyone. It being 6 p.m. on Wednesday, May 20th, we will begin our 6th budget hearing of the Committee of Ways and Means. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence for all those who serve in our military, at home and abroad, and for their families. Thank you. Clerk Semino, could we have a roll call, please?
Councillor Barrica?
Here.
Councillor Moran?
Here.
Councillor Flaherty?
Here.
Councillor Maglio?
Here.
Councillor Reynolds is presently not here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. We have no approval of minutes and no old business tonight. For those members of the public who are watching from home, on Wednesday, May 29th at 7 p.m. will be the annual town meeting when there will be a public hearing on the budget. Residents will be allowed to speak at that meeting. Again, that's May 29th. It's a Wednesday, 7 p.m. start time right here in Town Hall. Between now and then, if you have questions or concerns, please email towncouncil@braintreema.gov. Thank you very much for tuning in. All right, now we will begin our new business this evening. Do we have a motion to take off the table? We have 3 orders we need to take off the table: 24020, 24021, and 24022.
Madam Chair, I move that we take the aforementioned orders off the table.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous. Tonight, we are going to begin with our Planning and Community Development Department. We will then move to the Department of Elder Affairs, and finally, we'll have municipal licenses and inspections. So with that, we will start off with, we have our Director of Planning and Community Development, Melissa Santucci-Razzi, and Assistant Director Connor Murphy. Thank you both for being here this evening. Director, would you like to take it away?
I would love to. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And as noted, I do have my Assistant Director, Connor Murphy, here with us this evening. I've prepared 2 presentations. I have one for our general fund budget for the department, and then a separate presentation for the community preservation piece, at which time Elizabeth Manning will be joining as our CPC manager. So just quickly, we're here again, myself and Connor, for the Planning and Community Development Department budget. And I prepared a brief PowerPoint. A lot of the material has already been submitted in advance, and there's a whole bunch of new material as well. So just quickly would like to cover the staffing of the department. We have a director, an assistant director, conservation planner, a newly employed zoning planner, Jonathan Dickinson, so excited about that. We have an unfunded principal planner position, an unfunded staff planner position, an office manager, and then our CPC manager who's paid out of non-general fund sources. The boards that we cover in the department, the Master Plan Steering Committee and implementation going forward, the Planning Board, Conservation Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, Historical Commission, Community Preservation Committee, and the South Shore Home Consortium. So a lot of different jurisdictions out of the department, heavily regulatory and heavily permit related. Just to highlight a few things, special projects that most folks are familiar with in town right now. We have the Armstrong Dam removal, and that's sort of stretching over a couple fiscal years. We have our hazard mitigation update plan, which is going to be 24 and 25. Wood Road Revitalization Project that Connor is spearheading for the department with MAPC. Again, that's spanning 24 and 25. And then 74 and 90 Pond Street affordable housing feasibility that we will be wrapping up in this fiscal year. This slide is, the top part is a snapshot from the materials that Mike Esmond had circulated in the budget book, and I just cut and pasted that into here. And then just wanted to note for the Ways and Means, and really for the town as a whole, that it's important to note that while these numbers are great numbers, and we're very grateful for any funding that we do get from the town for the department, but if you can look at sort of the staffing and the exhibits that I've provided, I've gone every 2 years to get us to this fiscal year, and sort of what that looked like even in FY '29 versus what that looks like today, and the vacancies that we've had over the past several years. So I felt it was important to mention that. It's a very small department, and having even 1 or 2 unfunded positions puts a lot of shift and burden on primarily Connor and myself as a director and assistant director. Important to note, about 89% of the department budget is staffing, and then although we are small, we do generate some revenues from our fees for applications, which is detailed a little bit more in the presentation, but that total figure is just under $36,000 for last year. The next slide I thought important to share with the committee and the town as a whole. This is just a table of the grants that were secured in this fiscal year by the department. We have our inclusionary zoning feasibility study grant from EOHLC. We have 2 earmarks. One was one was an economic development earmark that the former administration was programming into a small business grant. There are some excess funds remaining in that $500,000, and that's something that Mayor Joyce and I are hoping to embark on some other new and exciting things moving forward. We have the second economic development earmark, and a bulk of that funding is going towards the MAPC Wood Road contract. We have a new grant that we received, the Coastal Resilience Grant, and our conservation planner, Kelly Phelan, is using that for some monitoring and management of the most recent salt marsh and berm work that was done down at Watson Park. And then through MEMA and our BEMA, but we're essentially the lead, our department on our hazard mitigation update. So while we don't have a lot of general fund money to do things like this, we take getting grants pretty seriously, and we try to put our best foot forward. And again, this is just a snapshot from, we have other projects that are ongoing that were also grant funded, but I just wanted to focus on what was captured in the last fiscal year. Then we have the tables, and these were included in the budget book as well. I just copied them over. Again, heavy on administration, very light on much of anything else. As you can see, that's where that 89% figure came from. Now I have a series of slides where I'm just going to do a quick breakdown on the different disciplines in the department. So the first one, I'm grouping planning and economic development together, because those essentially go hand in hand. As you can see over on the right, a long list of projects with a dollar amount at the top, and that's the funding that we secured through application fees from the planning board. We continue to look at those, and we're going to be looking at them again. There are some of those fees that are a little bit low, especially the use permit fees. So we're going to be taking a look at that and looking at some of our peer communities to make sure that we're competitive in our application fees. So some highlights from '24, obviously the completion of the master plan. We're actually in the process now of getting the final photos inserted and getting that to print. So there'll be bound copies. I'm preparing one bound, one for each member of the council. So those will be distributed once we receive those. We held back some money in the original funding, so we'd be able to pay for some copies. Obviously, we'll put an electronic copy up on the web as well. And we'll be getting into the implementation phase of things. I'll be doing a presentation to the department heads in June once we get through the budget season. And then Mayor Joyce will be putting together an implementation committee, and we will start to talk about priorities, what we can do fiscally, and start to chip away at some of the items, action items. We wrote and adopted our MBTA 3A zoning. I have to say, I want to thank Council Berica and Flaherty for their support on that effort. And it was a lot for a community of our size and sort of some of the situations that we've been through related to housing. But nonetheless, put our best foot forward and awaiting confirmation from the state on that particular zoning piece. We also now, safe to say, have a FEMA compliant floodplain bylaw, maybe. Don't hold me to that, but hopefully we're done with that. And then we're also involved with the Route 37 MassDOT corridor study and participating with CTPS on that. So what are we going to do next year? We are going to work on some economic strategies and policies, again, through the mayor's office. I know that she has some ideas and things, and we're really going to start to get our nails in on that endeavor. We're also looking for an implementation on the 3A zoning. I have started to meet with multifamily developers. I have brought some in to talk to the mayor. Connor and I last week went to a conference in Dedham and made some personal connections there, handed out our cards, and spoke about our new administration and our 4 overlays. So a lot of pulse around that, a lot of people getting excited about that in general in the Commonwealth. We're also going to be looking at, I'll call it maybe a guide of some quick fixes in our bylaw, things that we can handle administratively through the staff, some things that we can probably handle that will be a little bit more of a challenge for us, and then some things that we might need some consultants to come in and help us with. There was a lot of good work done in the comp rezone, and there's definitely some sections that we can pull from there. It's just, again, understanding that bylaw and all those sections were kind of companion sections, so it's not as easy as just pulling out individual sections. Some of the text would be very helpful moving forward, maybe in a different section and reformatted to go with some of our older sections that we might not be updating. We're also looking to complete the MAPC Woodrose Economic Development Study. We still have 2 phases left in that, Connor. We're in phase 2 now.
We're in the middle of phase 2 now. We expect phase 3 to begin in August with completion by mid-fall.
Thank you. And then by the, I would say by the middle of the fiscal year, we will be hopefully well into our implementation on the master plan. So the next slide is conservation, and again, just listing out those applications and the fees associated with those. The highlights were about 80% complete with the hazard mitigation plan. Last fiscal year, or fiscal 24, we had the kickoff of the Armstrong Dam removal. We continue to participate in the community rating system that is spearheaded and administered in our office. And again, that is something that, it's not necessarily a heavy lift, but it's definitely something that's worth doing when it translates to a discount on flood insurance for the residents here in Braintree. We also completed the Middle Street Trail and the start of the Watson Park monitoring and adaptive management grant funded. That has started up. That will go into fiscal year 25. And we also hired a new conservation ranger. So what are we going to be doing next year? Next fiscal year, we're going to be finishing the dam. We're just sort of at the point now where we have the new design for the supports for the boardwalk. We're looking to wrap up the hazard mitigation plan and then also continued treatment of Sunset Lake. For zoning, We hired the highlight for '24, and it's definitely a highlight, is we were able to hire a zoning planner who comes to us with background in zoning and planning, most recently in Falmouth, Massachusetts. So very excited to add staff to the department, primarily focusing on zoning applications that will definitely free up a lot of the assistant director's time. Connor has been covering that post, or since forever, I guess, not post anything. And we will have Jonathan also be looking, our zoning planner, looking at our sections that relate to nonconformities, excuse me, and variances. We actually had a very good section of that in the comprehensive rezone. So taking another look at that, new fresh set of eyes, and hopefully making some revisions. And we're also looking to be updating our application forms. We continue to look at those. We have some edits that we've been wanting to make for a while. It's always nice to have a fresh set of eyes on those types of things, and so Jonathan will be helping with those as well. On the historic side of things, some highlights. We completed Elm Street Cemetery. I think that was phase 3. We've done quite a few projects. This was primarily a tomb restoration project, and we'll likely be having an event there in the next couple months with Mayor Joyce, just to highlight some of those things in the Historic Commission. The historic inventory is also ongoing. That was a project that kind of took a back seat during some staffing changes and unfilled positions, and our CPC manager was able to get that going. On the right side here, interesting point, we don't charge any fees for our historic applications, and that's something that we're going to be taking a look at. What do other communities do? Doing those applications properly, reviewing them properly, having those meetings does in fact take some time, preparing the paperwork. So that's something that we might be looking to institute as well. And then going forward, what are we going to be looking at for our outlook for FY25? The Historic Commission has asked me to look at putting together some design guidelines for their district. And we've talked about it briefly. I've gotten some examples of some other communities, and we'll start to work on that. We will have a lot to do with the 2 JFK dispatch center next door that is located in the historic district. It will need other permitting from other departments, but that will be the bulk of the focus. There's also a historic restriction on the inside and outside of that structure by Mass Historic Commission, yes. So that will definitely be keeping us busy. And then as a takeaway from Mayor Joyce and her interest in cleaning up the front of 2 JFK and promoting that area, she is going to be putting together a committee. We will likely be involved, someone from our department, to work through what is that going to look like and what is that going to represent, and thinking about 2 JFK and that being redeveloped, there might be some opportunity to both of these projects to kind of piggyback off one another with different aspects of each complementing one another. Housing and the Social Home Consortium. So we are part of the consortium, which is Weymouth, Quincy, Milton, Holbrook, and Braintree. We participate pretty vigorously in that group. We are allocated home funds, which are federal HUD funds that come to us every year. And the member communities can come forward with projects and ask other committee members if they can use the funds for what they'd like to in their community. So on the Social Home Consortium side, we were able to, through the other peers in the communities and just them really understanding what an unbelievable project this is, secured $2.5 million in home funds that helped keep the Wynn Street development at the affordable level that they had initially planned on. We had initially given them 1.2 million, and just from the time that they had gone to DHCD, not only did they change their name to EOHLC, but this project experienced a large increase in the pro forma. So the state was able to help them, and we also came to the table through the consortium and helped them out as well. We've also executed a new 3-year tenant-based rental assistance contract for just over $300,000. That's a program that we've been administering since about 2009, where we help families and households pay their rent. We try to use it as a gap program, and if somebody's waiting for a voucher or they have been temporarily displaced, helping a lot of households and families that situations occur in their life, whether it's job loss, whether it's divorce, different situations, and try to help these folks out as best as we can. And we'll also be, just in the housing realm, completing the affordable housing feasibility study over at Pond Street. So next year, one of the things that we've been talking about through the consortium is reestablishing the Regional Fair Housing Committee. We were very robust for a short period, I'd say about 3 or 4 years. We held a series of events that were very successful, and we the members in the committee kind of lost interest, and COVID came, but now is really the time to really reestablish that. We were able to have some very successful workshops for residents in the consortium communities. We'll also continue to administer the TBRA program, we'll be working on the inclusionary housing study, market promoting and implementing our MBTA 3A zoning, and then hopefully putting out an RFP for 74 and 90 Pond Street. And that concludes the presentation. I can answer any questions. I can go over any line items. I do have some charts here that I prepared previous to the stuff that was published in the, excuse me, in the agenda book, but nonetheless, there was several reductions made in several line items to get to the target number, which we did meet. For Mayor Joyce and for Michael Esmond. And I just want to note that Michael's been a huge help and very welcoming and very friendly, and I just love the dialogue and the communication. It's very helpful when we put together these materials for the town.
Thank you so much, Director Santucci-Razzi, and we'll definitely echo the sentiments on Director Esmond's helpfulness during this whole process. And I'm very appreciative, as I'm sure the other members of the committee are, for this detailed information and so thoughtfully presented. And just before I turn it over to my colleagues on the committee, I do want to acknowledge that your department oversees many of our boards and commissions, and so a huge thank you to our residents who are all volunteers giving their time to the town on all these really important boards and commissions. So if you know somebody who's serving, please thank them next time you see them in the supermarket, because it's no small feat, but it really makes the town tick, and you guys administer all of that, and Kelly does too. I don't think if Kelly's here tonight, but thank you for all of that. All right. Committee members, I'd be happy to open it up for questions. Councilor Reynolds.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Ms. Santucci-Razzi and Connor. Thank you both for being here this evening. And it was a very good presentation. I appreciate all of that, thorough. Setting expectations is something that this town really has a big job to do in that area. And there's a lot for us to learn from our history, particularly over the last 10 years, and also going back 20 years. It's not just the last 10 years. So here we are tonight. A couple of questions I have for you that's Economic development. I know that that is an area that the mayor and the previous two administrations have also talked at times about having an economic development professional on the staff that would be dedicated specifically to economic development. However, you had also highlighted a few very important points tonight about the tools and the framework that needs to be put into place. And there's some key initiatives here that you have mentioned that I'm interested to know in this challenging revenue times that we have, that I'd like to know a little bit more, or if you could share a little bit more with us this evening, any insight you may have on the prioritization of those tasks. Amongst them, in particular, the implementation of the master plan, you had looked also, you spoke of the comprehensive zoning rewrite, which I see as the most sensible step to take after we have done the master plan. You and I both have a history together here in planning in this town, and that one of the biggest challenges to the planning board, to the professional staff, that plays itself out in our negotiations, and just how far we can facilitate common sense projects that will help us as a community to develop responsibly, uses, that it's severely curtailed by our, what I call, an archaic and very convoluted set of zoning laws that have become that way through a series of changes through the decades, particularly the late 70s, the 80s, the 90s, into the 2000s, where we started to take a different point of view about how things would get done and how we'd go about getting the right tools in place. Those archaic tools have made life very difficult for you, I know. The staff has had a very hard time. So let me just put the first question out to you. When do you see opportunity to address, as you said, the beginning of making some minor changes to the zoning?
If I may respond to that question through the chair. So, Member Reynolds, I really see all those three items that you had touched on, master plan, our zoning ordinance, and economic development, going hand in hand in hand and continue with one another. So we think of sort of the master plan as the foundation, which we have now completed, which we have recommendations, which we have strategies, and we have goals. And how we're going to accomplish a lot of those when we put our economic development hats on is through our revising our zoning. So there's definitely some direction in the master plan. It's no secret that we have, in the department and myself, have expressed frustrations over our antiquated ordinance. There's no other way to describe it. And then how do we look at those changes with our economic development hats and really starting to think about ways to not only improve the quality of life for our residents here, but to improve our financial stability, and really thinking about complementing use tables and really trying to be aggressive with, respectfully, uses that are going to be a good return financially for the community. And it's really about balance. You know, we had a conversation, this is just an example, with somebody the other day that's looking at a building in one of the squares and is talking about hair salons, you know. And I came right out and just was like, we're done with those. We have enough hair salons, we can do better. We want to make place. We want to attract people. We want to hear other people in other communities and other towns saying, we're going to go to South Braintree Square for dinner tonight. And really trying to send this message. And, you know, I had said to the person on the call, we were on a Zoom, Connor was there, you know, we're going to be very honest with you about, you know, what we're looking for. And he said, well, you already have been. And again, just really trying to, from the beginning, setting expectations for the residents, for the boards, and for the people that are coming to Braintree and for our future residents of we really need to think broader, wider, and really long-term. We want those nice, cute, quick fix uses that everybody likes. Oh, did you hear about this? This went to that town, or we went to this town. But for every one of those, we need somebody that's going to bring jobs to Braintree, that is going to be a player here in the community for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And respectfully, it's all about balance. And the community, just looking at our historical patterns, we've gotten heavy in some of those areas. We got so heavy in retail. So what do we have now? We have a lot of retail. We have a lot of big box. And respectfully, those buildings aren't worth enough for us. We need to think about augmenting I think of the town of Braintree as our portfolio, in our real estate portfolio. And if you were gonna go into real estate development, you would wanna have a diverse portfolio, because there's gonna be things that might perform and there's gonna be things that don't perform. But when you have enough of a mix, you can catch up and you can make up for those underperforming things. When you have too much of one thing and that might not be taking off, then you're dealing with more bulk at once, more things that you need to think about re-tenanting, and just vacancies. So just trying to be not scared of not scared of certain uses, going out on a limb, taking some risks. I mean, you're not going to succeed if you don't fail. And I think that it's for the first time in a long time in this community, I've actually started to feel like I'm getting back into my development groove. And I know that sounds a little bit, but it's the reality of it. We have been in a different mode for a while, and that mode's not working, hasn't worked. We got to think differently.
Okay, thank you. That was a great answer. I really appreciate it. It was insightful. You said something, and I just got one follow-up question, Madam Chair. So you said something that was very important to me, and I think the community needs to understand this, because it gives a sense of comfort, or I should say a sense of responsibility, that this isn't going to be the wild, wild west here in Braintree. It never has been, and it never will be. And that you said we have to balance the quality of life with our ability to generate revenues, because we know the importance of generating revenues and what kind of a situation, a lack thereof, of revenues can put us in. We're there now. So I see the most important thing to ensure us achieving that balance and maintaining that balance are the controls that we put in place. That's why I asked about these various initiatives. So what would be the first, from a spending standpoint, right now, what would be the first step in your mind to get us going down that path?
From a spending perspective?
From a spending perspective.
Well, the implementation part and getting the master plan off the floor is something that we'll be doing in-house. The zoning piece, again, that is, I plan on putting, this can be done immediately, this we need some time, this we need help. The help's gonna be dollars. We will need some funds to pursue some outside consultants.
Those three things that we discussed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I should have been clearer on that.
Which one
The
is?
master plan, the zoning rewrite, and the economic development plan.
So the question is, which one do we need
Which
money
one,
for?
if you had to make it right, we're in an environment where we have to make very targeted and smart choices.
Yes.
We don't have the luxury, unless that you can describe something to us that we're able to achieve in a parallel method if we were receiving grant money or something of that nature that would augment our revenues as they are today.
So, I would say, again, given our internal capacity, if funding was available, that we would secure, at a minimum, part-time economic development director, or a consultant that can really create a framework for us and some tools that we can then use implementing, or that we can then implement going forward.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate your time. And
Sorry.
thorough. No, it was a very thorough answer. We need
Thank
to
you.
hear that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Reynolds. Any other councilors have questions for the planning department? Councilor Maglio?
Thank you so much for all this information. It's fantastic. The couple of quick questions I have. The Small Business Grant Fund, how is there a place to see how those grants have been dispersed, to whom, and how much is left?
If I may, through the chair, to Council Maglio, probably yes. I am not involved, and our department is not involved at all with any applications coming in or administering anything through that program.
Where has it been administered out of?
It started with the Kokoris administration, and I honestly couldn't answer those questions accurately, Counselor. I'm guessing the mayor's office, but just like I said, I haven't really seen or been asked to do anything with that.
Kate Naughton in the mayor's office is the point person for those grants. So maybe if we can ask for that list, Director Esmond, that would be super.
That's great, thank you. The other thought that came up while we were talking, and this is something that's come up before, in your presentation, there's so many opportunities that are in there that you have written grants for, or that grants have come in for, and I just want to mention again that first a question, are those numbers in your budget or no? Okay, so one of the things that would be really helpful is to see the grant funding aggregated across departments. I think that is a major effort that is taking place, and I think it's, having access to the restricted fund information, I think is just helpful in terms of how a town is operating and what other kinds of resources staff are bringing to the table. So it's not so much because we need to have it in the budget so it can be absorbed by all these different functions. It's because we are able to do more things than the general fund can pay for.
Exactly.
I mean, a lot of your time is going into staffing where these grants are what these grants are covering, and getting these grants, and continuing to do what is not grant funded. So it's a lot.
Yeah, Counselor, I mean, the reality is we wouldn't be able to do the Wood Road project without a
Right.
grant. We just don't have that kind of funding. So it's paramount for our department to keep planning. We need money to plan.
Absolutely. So having some sort of a mechanism that can suss that information out without it having to be presented as part of a separate PowerPoint. I don't know how you would do that, Director Esmond, but maybe that's something that you could think about in terms of the grants in all the departments, because I think this comes up a lot, that there's a lot of other effort to bring resources in, which is major and critical and can make the difference. And so having regular access to that information helps educate people as to everything that's going on.
Yes, it's also kind of a real picture of the funding that's needed to do what we do. Yeah.
Yeah, great. The tenant-based rental assistance program, how would people, let's say someone's in trouble and they need a little assistance, how do they know that that's available and where to go?
Okay. If I may, so that program, we partner with Father Bill's in Mainspring. They are the social piece to that. We have the money, but we're not really set up at Town Hall to do intakes, sensitive populations, different types of situations. So I get a lot of referrals from the mayor's office. I get a lot of referrals from the housing authority, and then I get referrals from Father Bill's as well. It's not a lot of money, and we're actually in the process now of doing some calculations, and we might have room for potentially one more household, because we're paying about It's about 20,000 a quarter in rents that we're subsidizing. So it works on a reimbursement program. So household A, and we require that you partner with Father Bills for services. They have all kinds of things that help all kinds of households. And then the household has to find their unit and be able to rent that unit, and the case manager assists with explaining the program. And then Father Bills pays the rent, and then they submit all the paperwork to the consortium quarterly, and we review it. We do help with first and last security deposits, things like that. I mean, it's a lot of money up front, especially in a struggling household. So we don't do full, like, there's not a lot of advertising about it, and that's primarily because we don't have a lot of funding.
So, so 300,000 is what you mentioned. And do you get you get the reports back from Father Bills in terms of how much of that money has gone to Braintree households and in what size, what amounts?
Yes, I get, it's only for Braintree. You have to be a Braintree resident to qualify, and you have to occupy a unit in Braintree. Excuse me, the requirement of the program is you have to sign a minimum of a 1-year lease. And then we get the lease agreements. There's some attachments that go on that because landlords try to get cute with their leases, and Father Bills make sure everything's lawful. And then the tenant pays 30% of their income, and then we pick up the rest. So some households, we have some households that are single-parent households that are, they're making okay money, but it's tough. And then we have other situations where the income is very low and we're paying more.
So does this chiefly operate like a Section 8, or is this sometimes just a crisis to get over the hump of having 3 emergencies come up in your household and all of a sudden you're 2 months behind in your rent? Like an
A little bit of
MVRP.
both. So it's not a permanent voucher. So, and it's not permanent, and it's not like assigned to a person. So people have come in and out of the program over the last 10 plus years. And basically, it's as long as they're living in that unit, that we have a contract, and they agree to participate in the program. We do have people that renew. We income certify them, and they renew the leases. But it is not a permanent voucher, and it's subject. Like right now, I tell people I could pay your rent until the end of 26. We have continued to renew it, but it's subject to funding. The consortium, I took $2.5 million for Wynn Street and then another 3. So, in a couple years, they might say, Braintree, you've kind of had your, because we only get about $900,000 a year for all 5 towns.
And would you say that that is related to the fair housing effort, or that is something different?
The program itself?
Yeah.
The program itself is an eligible activity. The reality is when we joined the consortium, everyone was like, don't do tenant-based rental assistance, you're crazy, it's so hard to administer. So I immediately said, sign me up, I'm doing that. And again, for a situation that comes up, it's not a plan. I'm going to be getting on the senior housing list, or I'm going to be getting a voucher. To your point, Counselor, situations happen in life, and people are in. I had a young lady that was in the program only for, she did have to sign that 1-year lease, but she was in a bad situation and immediately turned it around, and we gave her permission to break the lease and everything because she got out of the situation she was in and was making very good money in short order. So
Great.
it can vary. It can vary.
Okay, that's super helpful. I have one more question, and it's related to economic development. I'm curious how much economic development pressure or limitations is related to possibly licensing, like liquor licenses, or parking ratios?
You know, I think that the zoning is definitely something that can hinder that. As far as the liquor licenses, I mean, we have got an exception for the licenses for smaller places under 75 seats. There's all kinds of things that, I mean, communities are always going for different special home rule things to get additional licenses and things like that, especially related to economic development. If you're really trying to get a particular area off the ground and you think that restaurants and food uses are part of that, or entertainment. I mean, everyone's serving alcohol nowadays. So I think maybe a combination of a few of those things, you know. Again, we're heavy on retail, we're heavy with this stock that doesn't easily adapt to sort of that smaller, more quaint niche type of thing that's really cool now. You know, I talk about Marketplace up here and I'm like, it's obsolete. Big box malls, obsolete. And we have that right there. As we've all seen, people are starting to diversify and break up their stores. But, you know, to think that when all those stores went in, they put something in the condominium docs about no food uses. And it's like, I can't even understand why they would put something in like that. That would be an ideal location for different food uses, especially with the highway frontage. I think it's a combination of a lot of things, Counselor. And I really just think that we need to just get back into the mode of making moves and hoping that they be successful, planning properly, thinking about them, evaluating things, and, you know, even the things that people get really concerned about and upset about in the community, and we have outcry over, you know, if that particular project does go forward, a lot of the times it's not benign in an insignificant way in other ways, but it doesn't raise to the level of concern or fear that sometimes people are concerned about during permitting.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm all set. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor Maglio. Counselor Flaherty?
Thank you. I just wanted to say I am continually impressed by the amount of work that this very, very, very tiny department does. I don't think that people commonly recognize how much is done by the, you know, recently now it's 5 people plus a part-time person, and for a long time it was 4 people plus a part-time person, and that's including the office manager. So the management of 7 boards, plus all the special projects, plus the regular permitting that you guys do it's really a lot. And I guess aside from just pointing that out, I wanted to talk a little bit, since we're in, you know, budget conversations. There are a few different things that are listed as being unfunded. The principal planner is listed as being unfunded, and the staff planner is listed as being unfunded. And you have also commented to Councilor Reynolds that you would think you could very much benefit from an economic director. And I just wanted to understand 2 things. One, would you prioritize an economic director above a principal or a staff planner?
I would.
Okay. And the other question that I have is, if you had one of those or more of those supports in your department, do you think that you would then be able to take on more of the special projects that you have listed 4 special projects? The Armstrong Dam removal, which was something that took more than a decade to do, I think. And then the hazard mitigation plan, which was a couple of years, and the Wood Road revitalization project, which we're in the middle of now, and the Pond Street affordable housing feasibility study, which we're also doing. Would you be able to do more of those? Can you give kind of some sort of estimation of how many more special projects you think you could really tackle if you had 1 more staff person or 2 more staff people?
I mean, to quantify it, Counselor, I don't think I could necessarily quantify it, but what I can tell you is that in a planning department with a good number of staff, those are ongoing, and we get very bogged down with just permitting. I mean, even the counter alone, I know Connor's here, I mean, the hiring of a zoning planner is now going to enable, I mean, we're not even really, I don't even want to, am I being the director I should be being for this department? Well, I'm trying to be that, but I'm also right there in the weeds, pumping out a ton of work product. And not that I wouldn't be doing that, but there is something to say about managing and overseeing and working with your staff. And I do work with my staff, but we get very individualized because that's the only way to get the work done. And bringing on more people is more thinking, more collaboration, more the zoning idea goes with the planning idea, and then conservation comes in, and economic, I mean, all these disciplines work together, and we do work together, but not as much as I would like for us to be working together because we're just that busy. That we kind of do our work and we regroup on things and we talk about things, but there isn't time or bodies for multiple people to be even involved on one project, really. We do really shoot for that, but there's just only so many hours in the day that we can function. I think ideally that, even if the principal planner and staff planner was a, principal planner for economic development or, and had some other sort of functions, while we have conservation, they're still doing department functions, zoning department functions, Connor and I are just doing any and everything that needs to get done. And that's how we roll. That's just what we have to do. And more bodies, again, back to that sort of that think tank and that collaboration and skills. Everyone sort of brings a different set of skills and a different set of eyes. It just makes for better planning as a whole. Projects, I mean, I'd take on 20 of these projects if we could. If we had the money and the bodies, I mean, that's the fun stuff. Not that we don't love permitting, but, I mean.
Well, what I'll comment on is just that one of the things that Braintree's going through right now is this question of whether to pass an override, and voters will decide on that. But part of the equation in that consideration is we also need to be making our other streams of revenue much more robust. And that is what this department, that is what this department is so crucial to. And so, in the context of that need, it seems to me like your department needs additional support, and I hope that you get it. Because I know that the special projects that we're looking at, that you have listed, are very impactful. I've been involved in a couple of them. The Wood Road Revitalization Project it's like a master plan, but for a very tiny area of Braintree instead of just the whole town. But it is composed of all the same phases and the same kinds of questions, and the same kind of expertise is necessary for deciding that. And if you don't have that expertise, you can't apply it to those sorts of projects, and then you can't drive your development forward in a direction. You just kind of react to whatever comes towards you. And I think there's a great desire on the part of residents of this town for us to be in the driver's seat instead of just reacting to whoever discovers us independently and thinks they'll take a shot. In connection to that, I just wanted to ask about the master plan. Is that available online now for residents to look at?
We haven't put up the final one yet. We're getting the photographs. We had a whole go around with the photos. I think you might remember. God, talk about, just leave the photos out. The what do you call it? The quality or something, the pixels. I'm not that tuned into that stuff. Wasn't good, this photo. So we got Darren at the golf course to go out with the drone, and then it was, I'm like, I need these 6 pictures. Well, it took like 600. So then we had to go through all the photos, and they're with the consultant now. So once the photos are inserted, there was a couple comments from the planning board about the acknowledgement page, and then we'll get that up to but we have the draft, which is essentially, it still says draft, But it is essentially the same document minus the back and forth on the photos.
I would really like to see that document made available to the public. I remember the conversation about the photographs, and it was very involved,
Yeah.
and an enormous amount of thought and discussion went into each one. But I think really, at the end of the day, they're just photos, and we should just, it really needs to be posted for residents to take a look at.
I agree.
And in the same vein, I would like to, it's not done yet, but when the Wood Road Revitalization Project is completed, I would like to see that documentation posted online for residents to see. And then the Pond Street Affordable Housing Feasibility Study. No, sorry. It's, yeah, the Pond Street one that we're working on right now, I'd like to see that posted too. I know how short-staffed you are. I know how difficult it is just to plow through your daily tasks. But this front-facing, interaction with the public is really important. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor Flaherty. Counselor Moran?
Melissa, I just want to, again, just echo the compliments of other counselors about the amount of work that you've done and some of the successes that you've had this year, particularly, not to be understated, is the MBTA zoning that got through, that I think is important to, now that we have it, let's make sure it's used in a way that complements Braintree. And so I think that's a great achievement. The key to it is taking advantage of it. I was going to ask, but Councilor Flaherty asked several questions about Wood Road, so I won't. And I don't have many questions about this budget because I think that it is modest in its requests and underwhelming, quite frankly, in its request for economic development. Just looking at that department, it has been diplomatically putting it dormant for the last several years. The major line item in it is subsidy of the Historical Society, which isn't really an engine of an economic engine for the town of Braintree. It may be, well-intended and well-used, but we're going down to $6,000 in that department this year from 44 in the past. That's astounding, and it is counter to what we need to be doing. But we also cannot forfeit our regulatory role as well in the planning offices. And we have to make sure that they're staffed and performing. My one question is going to be this. You have the insight and the institutional memory to know that there's a restriction in a condominium development, commercial condominium development that says no food uses on a prime piece of property. What would you need to be able to go to them and similarly situated properties that have obstacles or impediments in their documents to get them to reconsider, update them, and get them back in the game economically? Because that is something that doesn't cost a lot of money, but it could generate a lot of reuse. We can't be talking about economic development as tearing down vacant lots. We have to reuse what is underused and undervalued now. So what would you need to be able to do that kind of an outreach?
So that's a good question, Mr. Warren. I actually attempted to do that outreach several years ago, and the condominium association is ran by an attorney, and it was actually under the Sullivan administration. And reaching out to them, we'll work with you, we'll work on the parking, put a couple pads in out front, and there was absolutely no desire whatsoever to. So, if you have a town employee calling saying, we'll work on your parking and drop pad sites in facing the highway, I would think people would be drooling over that. But there wasn't really much enthusiasm whatsoever. I think generally in response to that question, Mr. Moran, getting back to being the director, and I've talked to the mayor about this, the director I should be and want to be and am very capable of being is doing that, making those connections. Hey, I'd like to come up to your office for a couple hours. Let me tell you about a couple things that we're thinking about here in the community and how you might benefit from those. You know, have you talked to people and you've encountered some obstacles? We're looking at these particular items in our zoning, you know, how can we tweak those to make them work better for you? Really sort of understanding what have these property owners heard, what have been the obstacles, and how do we fix that for them. And it's about creating relationships and dialogue. I mean, even last week when Connor and I were over in Dedham at the MBTA, it's like every break, I'm like, I'll be right back. And I'm like, just handing out cards and talking to people, smiling, showing enthusiasm and making those connections. And really, like, again, what is going to make Braintree stand out from anybody else? Is it that was like, oh, this young lady came up to me and from Braintree and gave me her card. You know, she seemed like she had some enthusiasm, and really trying to make those personal connections that are going to make us stand out from other communities when retailers are looking, or larger companies are thinking about making moves. And I mean, the move that some of these large real estate companies have made into communities that you thought people would never be looking at, well, it's happening, folks, and it should be happening here. It really should. I believe in those connections. I believe in that dialogue. And I believe in that kind of openness of, we're here to help, call me, you know, let's work through issues together as we move forward, because we don't have all the answers. And if we don't hear from the development community and landlords, how are we going to best address their needs?
I think the mayor did an excellent job of outreach at the recent Chamber of Commerce breakfast, where she said she wants Braintree to be the go-to, not the go-through.
Yep.
And I think we need, as elected officials and as department heads, to follow through and make sure that that resonates and that message is carried forward in every interaction that we have with businesses. Not to say that we're just going to, you know, we're not going to regulate and we're not going to protect the character of the community, but we want to attract positive and good businesses that will, you know, revitalize our community and our tax base. So I have no further questions at this point. I would like at some point to have a broader and lengthier discussion about community preservation. I have some very...
I have a whole thing on that. I'm going to hit that next.
I'll wait if until it's appropriate on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Moran. I have a few questions, unless anyone else had a second round. Okay. And thank you to all of my colleagues on the committee, because I kept checking things off my list. So it's so great to work with all of you. So I'll go in a different direction that we haven't quite touched on yet, and that is fees. We've talked a lot during these budget hearings about fees. And one thing I noticed, and I just want to help me understand it better, is on, for example, on the Planning and Economic Development page, I don't think they're numbered, Planning Board. Yeah. So for example, Lundquist Drive, the fees are at $29.42, whereas 99-107 Hancock's at $9,200. And then Elm Street, Hawthorne Road, there is no charge. So can you just help me understand the differentiation with the fees?
So we have, let me get on Hawthorne first. That was a rezone application, so it was just us doing our public, they're not actually filing, they're filing with the council. I'm not sure if there's a fee for rezones with the council. Lundquist Drive commercial project, that one was no building construction, just paving.
Yes, if I may, through the chair, it was all paving, stormwater improvements, landscaping improvements, but the fee is based on the amount of disturbance.
Okay, so you don't have to go through each of the fees. I'm just trying to understand like what the differential is. So for if there's more disturbance, there's higher fees, or is it based on time? Like how do these add up?
So commercial construction has a price when you're building a building. Then there's fees for people that aren't building buildings, for grading permits, putting in
Okay.
parking lots, that would be on disturbed area. And then 99107 Hancock is residential and they pay per unit.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so there's a
Super helpful.
whole.
Okay.
There's a whole hierarchy of fee schedules.
Okay, and that's something that,
But
This-
to your, to that question and what I had said earlier, like some of them don't jive.
Okay.
So we're gonna be looking at kind of, how to maximize, on the commercial side and maybe probably increase. Like if you're coming for a use special permit, the fee's only $375. You're putting in a whatever $1 million facility at South Shore Plaza, you're paying $375.
Right.
So there's definitely a disconnect.
so,
in that.
okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So Director Esmond, I think at the first day of hearings, you talked about delivering us that list of fees before July 1st? Before the start of the fiscal year?
That's right, Chair. Sorry. That's right. The goal we've been looking at for some departments is to be ready for July 1st. I think, realistically speaking, what we're going to probably provide to the Ways and Means is the listing of the fees that are in the universe of what we're looking at. But the implementation of them all being July 1st is not really likely because some of them will require, approval by the boards that may govern them. And others, we just want to make sure that we have it right. So we have to, there's quite a bit of fees across the spectrum that have not been reviewed or updated in some time. And a number of departments have a lot of good data on it, but not in all cases do we have the consistent enough data that we're going to be able to make confident decisions. So I expect that what we'll do is identify all of those fees, including the ones that have been discussed additionally that weren't necessarily being looked at, maybe not even general fund, and I try to signal the time frame. But it's probably that the expectation with everything that we would be looking at would be more likely to be implemented by September 1st.
Okay.
I did say July 1st, but as we've kind of moved through this, it is, and added a few different ones that we hadn't looked at. It's probably not likely that that'll all be in as good a shape as we'd like it to be by July.
I'll see if my colleagues disagree. I'm very comfortable with at least getting the list, understanding that, let's get it right, and if that takes a little longer, that's fine. But I do think just seeing the breadth of the fees we have today would be helpful. So along those lines, historical, which is Planning Community Development Historical Commission, or historical. So my recollection, and this is I guess a question both for Director Esmond and the planning team. 75 Columbus, I believe, was a violation of the demolition delay, or so was there no penalty? There's no financial penalty for a
Chair.
violation?
Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
So that situation, the homeowner, young lady, went to the zoning board of appeals to put a second floor on the house. And Connor, I believe, had gone out to do, and the whole entire thing was, the homeowner was absolutely, this young lady was absolutely horrified. So given the location, given the structure, we did not pursue that as a violation. She literally thought she was going to be getting a master bedroom and some other nice things on the second floor, and the entire thing is gone. So in that particular situation, we did not pursue enforcement through fines.
Okay, and I actually think I was at that ZBA hearing that evening, but I think certainly not the homeowner's fault, but maybe that is another thing to consider, is if contractors are violating our rules and conditions, there should be a penalty, not to mention the time, Connor's time, going out there, researching it, the board's time, and so on and so forth. So it's nice to be nice, but not at the expense when there's like rules in place for a reason, so.
Yeah, Counselor, I have to be honest, this community is a no parking ticket town, a no fine, it's kind of like the culture here, and I think there just needs to be a shift in, you get a ticket or you get a fine, you have to pay it, you
Yep.
know? You know, people get upset and make calls, and you know how that goes.
I have two more questions. I don't know, Connor, if you need to get to the ZBA, but if you do, please feel free to excuse yourself.
Oh, that's why you were saying it was 7. I'm sorry, I totally forgot. I'm like, do.
So Melissa, I have two more questions for you. Sorry, Director Santucci Razi. First is,
Dead anyways.
we had undertaken a South Braintree Square Rapid Recovery Plan in 2021, I think.
Yep.
Can we get and it doesn't have to be tonight, but could we get an update on progress, if any, on that? Because there was some, I thought, very good suggestions that came out of that with wayfinding and signage and whatnot.
Yes. Yes, so back to the question about the the 500,000, that was one of my suggestions, that we undertake some of that initiative. One of the other pieces on that was the parking. You know, we've
Yeah.
heard from a million consultants, you have enough, you're not managing it correctly. So we either decide we're gonna manage it, or I'm not doing parking anymore, I'm sorry. But that was definitely one of the things. Again, branding, creating place, creating a pulse, having, you know, there's even some communities that have these sort of interactive kiosks, and, you know, you are here and you can see all the different uses. You know, sometimes people just, they come to an area and they don't know the area that well. We'll give them an opportunity to seek something else out, information driven. I talk about parking meters all the time. I still think that we should have them. They're a good way to keep people on their toes, and they generate revenue. I mean, so those are all things. The business plan, we had a draft of that. Those are things, Counselor, that, you know, kind of, those are some of the things that fall just
Yep,
based on
understand.
time and deadlines.
And then the last question is regarding the Conservation Department. I'm trying to remember when it was, but I think it was last year. There was some unauthorized beach building over at Sunset Lake that got remedied. However, it was not supposed to happen in the first place. And my understanding was that one of the outcomes of that unfortunate incident was that there was going to be a waterfront management plan put in place by the Conservation Department. And again, I was just wondering if we could get an update, and it doesn't have to be tonight, but I can get you you look confused, so I'm happy to get you the information.
Yeah,
I
I've never heard of it.
Okay.
Did somebody in our office say that was gonna happen? Or
At the time, it was coming down from the Chief of Staff at the time, who was Nicole Taub.
Okay.
And I know Kelly's not here tonight.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
which is
can tell
fine.
you that she's not working on that. We are doing the aquatic treatment and
Yeah.
and that stuff there. But as far as a waterfront management plan, I can follow up with her if that's something that,
I think in
I can tell
terms
you
of-
she's not doing it, but
Yep,
if that's something
understood.
that there's interest in doing, and it's just even something simple about roles and responsibilities and, you know, sort of what can be done there or can't be done there.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful, and I think, you know, we've had another of our through lines here has just been this, you know, sustainability and environmental stewardship that, in my opinion, needs to be woven into all of our policies, and this would be one of them. So, thank you for answering those questions. I don't have anything else on planning. Do you want to move to, Sue, do we have to open anything specific for CPC? Because it's, okay. Do you want to move to the CPC component?
I'd love to.
And
My
thank you.
computer's dead, but everyone has the handout, so.
Yes.
And Liz Manning is here.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ms.
And-
Manning.
Yes, I just want to make it clear that this program would not be what it is today, and we would not be doing what we're doing today, and we would not have all the wonderful reports and different things if it wasn't for Liz. She's behind the scenes a lot of the times and not at meetings and things, but she is an invaluable member of our team in planning and community development. So my first sheet here, excuse me, is what makes up our CPC funds. So we have the 1% of our tax levy, first 100,000 exempt on residential, and then we have the state match, which I've shown some figures here so people can get an idea of what the matches have been in the past. And I just want to remind everybody that the matches come from, mostly from registry fees, and then sometimes some surplus money in the state budget that you could see from 22, fiscal year 22 and 23. So when we put this together, I can't even remember, a couple months ago now, did some projections off of the tax levy, and we do a kind of very conservative number. I'll be working with Mike going forward to tighten these up a little bit, but nonetheless, there was a lot to tackle when Mike got here, and CPC is not as paramount. So that number is conservative and doesn't include an override. So if there is an override, that local surcharge will be much higher. Then we have the state trust distribution. We received some guidance in March that would likely be lower than 20%. We projected about 19.2%. There are some asterisks next to those numbers, and that's because we received some guidance last week that the match would only be about 14 or 15%. So these numbers are already in print and everywhere. I didn't want to start recreating budgets, but I felt it was important to share that with the counselors. And then again, looking at sort of the total on the 1.26, and that the asterisks, if the match, well, there's a couple things that could impact this, the override and the match. So the override, our local numbers will go up. The 1% of a higher number is obviously higher, and then our match would be, even if it was at the 14 or 15%, it would still maybe be around that number, depending on what the surcharge is. And then when we talk about the buckets, again, just noting there's a minimum 10% into the community housing, open space, and historic buckets. This year, we're programming about 12, with 5% of the total for admin funds, and then the rest into the undesignated budget reserve. So that's basically what I have put forward for the budget this year. The second page of the presentation is just a snapshot. We have, Liz has, tables and charts and all kinds of things going back to the beginning of time as it relates to CPA, but just shared 22, 23, and 24 with the committee list of projects with some status updates. As you can see, some are completed, some are ongoing, and then a little more detail. I can answer any specific questions about those, which I'm sure some of you may have. And then just a little snapshot on the next slide of where we are today in the appropriations, recent appropriations this fiscal year. Some of them have the number 23, but that's because they're in the calendar year 23 for the council, and also a running total on our admin costs. So going into the next fiscal year, we have just under 1.7 million. What we've also done is our outlook for FY '25, and Liz keeps a running list of everybody that we talk to and interact with. Takes a while sometimes for people to get their projects off the ground. Nonetheless, we forecast, we update the committee every month. I know some of the members here receive our updates as well. So we thought we'd share this with everybody. This is about another 1.25 plus or minus in potential projects. They probably all won't be FY '25 ones, but these are the ones that are sort of in the pool or waiting to get close to the pool.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and that's it. So any specific questions, any explanations, any recaps? And I want to thank, again, I can't thank Liz enough. I really, it's just Community preservation's always been a passion of mine, and I was never involved with that under our previous director. But it's part of that fun stuff, part of that feel-good stuff, part of putting the residents' dollars back to work for them in quality of life, frankly.
Yeah,
Thank you.
echo those sentiments, and also want to say thank you so much to Liz Manning, who's always answering questions thoroughly and promptly, and has done an outstanding job, and so happy you're on the team, so thank you. Council Moore, do you want to start us off, since you already whetted the appetite?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you explain to me, when money is appropriated or authorized for a project, is it the applicant or you as the administrator? Who is in charge of how it is spent? Who authorizes its expenditure?
So some of the projects, we are like the originator of the project as well. So we manage a lot of the CPC projects in our office, whether it's Liz, Kelly, or myself. A lot of them, as you can see from the list, are other town departments. Liz and I like to pay all the bills. We typically prefer that setup. We make sure that we receive those deliverable items, and we put those expenditures through Munis. Sometimes, depending on who's overseeing the project, in other town departments, they will take on that duty as well. Outside people, we don't have a lot of non-town projects. We did have one from All Souls. In that particular case, it was an architectural project. We received the invoices directly from the architect and reviewed those and then made those payments accordingly.
Is there a timeline created for the project once the funding is secured?
When the contract is signed, Mr. Moore, and there definitely is a completion date in that contract.
Okay, and when there's variation or deviation from that completion date, how is it addressed?
On our projects, we tend to be a little on the extreme oversight side of things, which I always find to be a lot better than the undersite oversight. We had one come up today. We're working on the historic inventory project, and we will execute an extension to that contract, primarily to keep rates and those types of things in place. That's something important that we do in those contracts. Projects where things have expired, people aren't watching them as close as they want them to, and they've incurred costs.
Okay, my concern is specific to a project in my district, the street hockey rink. It seems to have bogged down significantly, and I'd like to know what is being done to get it back on the rails and get it back going.
We met last week or the week before.
Yeah, within the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, so we were not the lead on that particular project. We were not the one managing that project, and things are not, I'm not happy with it either, the time or the lack of oversight on that particular one. So there was some different things. I don't want to talk too much about the specifics here in a public setting, but whether to continue forward, switch gears. There was a few different things that were talked about, primarily with DPW,
Okay.
as they're the lead on that.
You know, if I could also to Mike, if I could be involved and kept informed of the status of that project on a weekly basis, I'd appreciate it, because I'm concerned that you have so many other priorities that it could get lost because it's not moving, and it's easy not to pay attention to when it's at a stalemate. And I think my concern is it reflects poorly on us as a town that we can't get a project done in a timely manner. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moran.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Moore. Councilor Flaherty?
Thank you. I have a follow-up question to that. There are occasionally projects which are proposed to the Community Preservation Committee and approved by the council, and then kind of, they just don't move forward. So there's two in mind that I have in mind as examples. One is there was a Winfield Adams project that was approved by the council, I think, in 2019. And that was not proceeded after the election. It was just reprioritized differently. And then separately, there was a skate park design project, which was subsequently approved. And that design project was completed. But I don't understand why we had a design project with no plan to move forward with actual implementation of the design. So I'm just looking for some comments on the extent to which, like, when are we definitely sure that we're doing something?
Yes. If I may, Counselor Flaherty. So the Winfield Adams one, and again, Liz and I are like constantly in cleanup mode. What's going on? Why aren't you spending the money? You know, where we understand this and share this sentiment as well. We were told by the Recreation Department that we're not going forward with that project, and the money was returned to the council. So, well, excuse me, to the kitty. I should not to the council.
To the CPC.
Yeah, to the CPC fund. So what I had spoken a little bit about before, Counselor, is we don't, you know, I see the Community Preservation Committee as a bank, essentially. They're not coming up with the projects. They're not really managing the projects. They're just determining for the community whether or not they think this is, you know, worthy of the council spending their time on to deliberate and appropriate the funding in the form of a recommendation. The projects come from different town departments, and, you know, when we, or if I was going to be putting forward a project, it would be because you eventually want to see it happen. And again, I can't speak to the internals of other town departments and why they didn't pursue those projects, but I can understand the questioning around that, and why would you spend money to design something if you're not going to construct that? So, and one of the things in response to this, your question and some of the other questions this evening, and Liz and I talking, is we're going to start putting a little bit more focus on capacity. And if you bring a project forward to the Community Preservation Fund, you need to demonstrate that you can manage it, spend the money, and get it done within the contract frame. Because when that doesn't happen, it ends up with delays, and time is money. And we've seen that happen. We've seen people come back, and I've heard it from the president, the chair this evening, and I couldn't agree more. We do not want to be coming back for more money. You got X amount of dollars, that was the price, and you have to move on this, and it requires, consultants need to be managed, like over-managed. And that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of capacity, and it's like you need people to spend money. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. The community preservation has you know, not tons of money, but they have sufficient funds to do projects. But if you can't contract them properly and manage them properly, then the work isn't going to be done as explained and as appropriated. So that's something that we've started to think about internally as well, that we want to, when we're talking about a project and the council makes an appropriation, you know, that it needs to get done, and it needs to get done in a very timely manner and right away. Because you're not going to be able to get it done for the price that you thought if you don't move on it.
Can I
Yes.
just add?
Yes,
So
please.
a couple of the, you know, sort of methods that we've used to try to keep these projects on track and on budget and on time is we've really had to circle back on getting really good pricing. And pricing is hard to come by. It's time intensive. It's not easy to get, you know, vendors and contractors to get back to you. And So we've really had to push and push and push, and actually we have an application coming in next month, hopefully, on historical record digitization. And the folks over at the library, it's taken probably like a year and a half for them to be able to have the time and the resources to get that pricing to really understand, what it's going to take to do this project. So when that project comes in next month, I'm very confident it's going to be a really solid project. We're going to be able to go to the committee, get the right number appropriated. They're going to get that thing out to bid and get a contract and get the project done in a timely manner. So that's one way, but it's time consuming and it's resource intensive. The other thing we need to re-implement is contracts or MOUs with the with the fundees to make sure that we have a really carefully spelled out scope of services and time for performance and et cetera. That's something that we haven't done a ton of since I've been here, primarily because most of our projects have been town departments. But in other jobs in other communities, you probably need to have the MOUs with the town departments, perhaps even more sometimes, just to spell out the responsibilities and who's supposed to be doing what part of the project. So we're going to look at that as well, get that sort of tightened up, and then what was the third one? And we've also implemented, particularly with design projects, having the consultants come back to the committee, sort of at like key check-in points, because that way, at a minimum, like we don't have to get 9 to 12 months down the road before we realize that the project is behind schedule, and we sort of catch it like 3 or 4 months in, and then if another 4 or 5 months goes by and we're still not seeing performance, we have a really clear record of what they told us they were going to do when they came and sat in front of us. So those are some of the things we're doing, and it circles back on time and resources for project management.
To understand from the fact that there's no skate park development on the list, that has been just backburnered and there's no plan to proceed with it?
I haven't heard or identified a proponent for funding for construction, to construct the project. Like, I haven't necessarily seen that. So I'm sort of like, I'm more than happy to work with somebody to get an application together, to help them, even if they need help with the procurement aspects of it. We do a lot of that with contracts and procurement. But we're not necessarily the ones that are going to construct a skate park. So I'm sort of waiting on someone to say, oh, I want money to construct a skate park. You know what I mean? Like, that's our role, is we're sort of waiting for that ask to come to us.
I do understand what you mean. It just makes it hard on the body that authorizes this funding to know if we're authorizing something that's going to happen. That's a process problem that I think we should focus on solving. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Reynolds?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to follow up on 2 points the previous speaker made. This conversation, the latter part of the conversation about having the wherewithal and the process in place to ensure the project is going to be completed. I think the director also spoke about that when there was talk about the Adams Park project as well, and then answering Councilor Moran's question about the street hockey park or street hockey rink up in the Highlands. That the level of expectation, which is a great term to be using, was used earlier tonight. I think that maybe as part of that process, we could take a look at that as a council when we do this type of very specific referral. Yeah, the second point, if I could, was on the Adams Park. I just want clarification on the slides here and reconcile it with the comment. Did I hear correctly that the previous approved project that was started at Adams Park, at Winfield Adams Park, the DPW has decided to discontinue that project?
Yes, Counselor, that was to, I think it was just to redo one of the fields there, because it wasn't a lot of money.
Well, if I could, this
Was
is
it
my main...
design?
It may have just been design.
Okay, my main concern was that it's not associated with the street construction that occurred and that had an impact to the entranceway at the corner of Adams and Commercial Street.
No, no, and,
Okay.
and so there was the Winfield ballpark at Adams Park, and then I would say about a year and a half ago or so, there was some neighborhood interest in improving Adams Park itself. And our previous administration had some neighborhood meetings out there, and Liz worked on putting together some solicitations for design. And then, you know, we started talking about setting expectations. You know, you hire somebody to do a design, they come back with a $2 million plan. Are we spending $2 million there? No.
Right.
So, a little bit about, you know, did we want to rail in the scope a little bit? And Liz, I know that you had talked to Jeannie. Jeannie Giagrande was sort of leading that.
It was actually myself and Councilor Maglio were at those meetings.
At those meetings.
Because that, Adams Park is actually in my district. And Commercial Street, the other side of Commercial Street across from Adams Park is the Councilor Maglio's district. So we were very interested, and we have been in contact with Jean. So you've
Yeah.
answered my question. We don't need to go down that
Okay.
any bit further. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor Reynolds. And thank you both for sticking with us here. I think what you're hearing, and with this committee that's on for the next year and a half, you know, as you've already seen with some of the requests that have come for CPC funding, like we're expecting more answers than maybe what we've received in the past on applications, and that's certainly my expectation going forward. So thank you for your diligence. I think, and I am under the umbrella of we don't have enough people or resources, I would feel like it would be valuable to understand what's our vision, what is our mission as a community for how we're going to plan for Community Preservation Committee funds. I don't know what our mission is, and maybe we have that, and maybe we don't. And if we don't, I think that would be valuable so that as we're evaluating these applications, we know where this fits in the scope of our vision for our community. You talked about it earlier tonight with the master plan implementation. So one sort of technical question from me is if we're getting on average, based on the state's funding and whatnot, let's say between $1.1 and $1.3 million a year of CPC funds coming in, all for like just all these projects are so worthy and excellent. What is our, again, policy I think would be appropriate, but what is our rule of thumb or our policy for how much money we should be expending every year? We're not a bank, right? We want to use the money we have. But if we're getting about 1 to 1.2 million every year, what do you feel is appropriate for annual expenditures against that?
Well, I mean, we haven't nailed down a number, but I can tell you that some communities spend all the money every year, and they zero it out. They run rounds, they run competitive rounds, and you're pitted against other projects and you're scored. You know, if that's a way that the community wants to go, there's pros and cons to that. I have said this before, that a lot of towns do that because of town meeting, and that's the only time a year that those appropriations could be made. There are other communities that don't have that do that, and that really, you know, sort of steps up the game for applicants, because they've got to put their best foot forward. They're going to be ranked against other applications, and it's essentially competitive. You know, we talked a little bit about that, you know, there's pros and cons again. Then it's like you're slammed all at once and you have all this work to do, you know, 1 or 2 times a year. I mean, given that cycle and our funding, we would likely have applications, you know, required 3 or 4 months before they're even going to get the funding. The other thing is that, we've seen, and I make jokes, and I probably shouldn't, but that, CPA is really the capital plan augmentation. And, if we had a robust, and I know that Mr. Edmund this is also on his list, a robust and thoughtful, sort of capital plan, but really what's really important on that side is really the needs assessment. Where is the assessment of all of these town facilities and locations and recreational attributes and whatnot in the community and their condition? Why is this one more important than that one? Why should we spend money here and not there? There's a whole bunch of different things. There's something to be said about spending the money equally in the districts so that every sort of part of town is getting the benefit of what they're contributing to the surcharge. So I think there's a lot of different ways that we could go about that and we could improve that. That's going to up the game. I have no problem upping the game. And that's going to really put it back on the applicants to put their foot forward. I would welcome the council members if there's things that you want to be asking during your hearings, if those are things that we should be including in the applications. But the capacity is definitely, you have to demonstrate that whoever's going to be running this project is capable of doing that and completing it. That's paramount. But I'd be open to other questions or talking about this at a future date. Or if, from Ways and Means, if there's a desire from the committee and, maybe 1 or 2 people could sit down with Liz and I and we could talk about those and think about ways that we could. And then as far as the planning, we don't have a CPC plan. I think Liz and I would love to do one or hire somebody to help us do one. But then again, that's really going to, set the stage. In this, we need to fix this, and how do we get this done? And there's not going to be any room for that.
Thank you for that thorough answer. I really appreciate it. So on a specific note then, for projects that have received CPC funding, and this was actually a question that came to me from a resident, and I thought it was interesting. I'd like to pose it here. So the house that's at Liberty and Grove, which has received CPC funding, I believe that was in the affordable housing bucket.
We had a couple buckets, I think.
Okay.
No.
Are those then restricted? Do we have a sort of, to Councilor Flaherty's earlier point about now what? We purchased that house. What is the plan for that house?
So I think it was an unrestricted purchase with historic and potentially open space.
Oh,
we did talk about doing housing there.
I think it was open, it's open-ended as to which restriction it goes under, right? Whether it's a open space restriction, right. It will need to have a level of restriction based on its use. If it goes for affordable housing or if it goes for, it essentially qualifies potentially under all 3 categories.
Okay.
So the use of the property is really the question at this point.
So under the previous administrations, numerous conversations requesting that there be a meeting, and I was suggesting that the district councilor, and now we have a new one, what does that district want to see there? Again, it was an unrestricted purchase. Our current administration has a desire to do something with the house. Liz has been looking at some different community garden type of initiatives that she's really excited about, and we think a couple things can happen there. It's just we need to have a larger community discussion and get some support around a particular avenue that then we could then pursue. Okay. We could just restrict the house and sell it. We can spend money and fix it up as a historic and put a historic restriction on it and rent it as an affordable unit. I mean, the pie chart just keeps going. We just want a little more direction, and we'd like to be able to hear from the neighborhood. I was saying the minute we come up with an idea, everybody will hate it. So why not, turn to the community in the district and try to germinate some ideas at that level that we could then expand upon.
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
But we
it's
need
being
to do
thought of.
something. We
Yeah.
need to do something
Okay.
with that. It should have already been done, respectfully.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Okay. I think you're free to go. Thank you for taking the time with us this evening, and please pass along our thanks to Connor, who's now
I
upstairs.
know, when he showed me 7:05, I'm like, yeah? I wasn't even thinking. Appreciate the questions and the time this evening. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. We good to keep going? People need a break? Okay. Next up, we have our Elder Affairs, and we have Director Biswas with us. Thank you so much for staying. We appreciate you being here tonight, and I know we all got our handout from you, so thank you so much. And if you want to start off with anything, Director Biswas, go right ahead.
Okay. Can you hear? Yeah.
Yep.
You can. So good evening, councilors. I'm excited to see two of our former chief of staff in the panel, which is awesome. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today to present to you our short, sweet, and simple budget. I have Mr. Hank Joyce with me. He's our chairman of the board. He has been sitting here patiently. And Tim Burke was here too, but he had to go to another meeting. So.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce.
He came from a baseball game. So, as you are aware, the mission and focus of Elder Affairs is to serve the older adults who live in the town of Braintree, and occasionally we will serve people who live outside the town of Braintree. They say that they get better answers from us, so we will try to help them out, unless, there's money involved. Our main focus also is to provide information of services, transportation, outreach, Asian outreach, and programs for fitness, education, and recreation. To me, transportation, actually Frank DeFrancesco was going to come here today to support me, but I have to say that transportation, I think, is one of the most vital services we provide to the citizens of Braintree, the older citizens of Braintree. Many people who cannot drive and also live alone, our transportation helps them live a healthy and an independent life, because our van takes them to the medical appointments. Every Tuesday we have grocery shopping, and people who have nothing else to do at home, not nothing else, but people who would like to come to our senior center, we also bring them to our senior center for different activities. Our outreach staff serves the older adults who are frail and often lonesome. They will do home visits. A friendly visitor, which is not paid by the town, but it's a different grant. She visits people in their homes. And also with the partnership with the library, we have a program called Library Express. So people who are avid readers cannot go to the library. We will take the books from the library and give it to them. Other program we have is, of course, activities, which provides fitness, education, entertainment, and relaxation. So those are the main things we provide. Of course, I just want to give you some data. The population, according to the 2020 census, is 9,847, even though the town clerk's office has about 10,000. So I don't know why the difference there is. Transportation we provided to people last year was almost about 2,000, and we gave about 3,900 trips. The total people we served last fiscal year was 20,700. That's, of course, a duplicated number. The unduplicated number is about 1,225. We also loan out medical equipments like wheelchairs, which is donated to us, wheelchair commodes, bed rails. We gave out about 142 equipments to the people who needed them. Now, do you have questions about our budget? As you have seen, that it was 338,429 last year, and this year we managed to get it down to 3,036 and 781. Mike Esmond, thank you. He worked with us to get our budgets where we could, but as I told him, we were running out of gasoline money, some natural lighting money, and then also we had contractual obligations. So we had to fill in the gaps with some money taken from a position that is not filled right now. And here is our budget, and if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer.
Thank you so much, Director Biswas, and thank you for all the services you and your staff and volunteers provide for the town's senior citizens. It's a huge benefit to the community, and it is an understatement to say you're running it all on a shoestring. So thank you for your commitment. Is there any questions from committee members? Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you. So I'll just begin by complimenting you on the wonderful and welcoming atmosphere that you create for all the residents who visit. And I know that you are able to offer knowledge about many, many, many services that are beneficial to them. And you are a tremendous resource for this town, and you deserve our unmitigated gratitude for that.
Thank you.
Oh, well, you're more than welcome. You commented first that you think transportation is one of the key services that you're able to provide people because it affords a measure of independence and ability to continue to live independently. Mm-hmm. And I can certainly appreciate how in a community like Braintree, where public transportation is minimal, that really would be, quite true. So when you talk about the number of people that you help and the number of trips that you're able to help them with, would you say that that is an area that you would target first if you had additional funding? Or do you feel like in that area, while there's a great need for it, you're able to really fill that need? Or is there some other more pressing need that you would identify first if you had more funding? Because really that's what I would like for us to be able to distribute to you is additional funding, and I'd like to know if you had it, what would you do with it?
First of all, I think transportation, we have 3 wheelchair-equipped vans and a car. All of them are derived from grant money, and so the town usually has to just pay the matching fund, which will amount to $12,000. The last time we bought one of our vans was 2020. So we are almost need for another van because the mileage, last time when my monthly reports to the Department of Transportation, I think the month of March we did 388 miles on the whole month, driving people back and forth. Right now, I have to say, our transportation, we have only one full-time van driver. So that is becoming a little tough for us. Our part-time van driver is out on medical leave, so he's not coming, and also another driver who's our volunteer is helping with his wife's physical needs. But if you ask me, I would ask to fill the position that's open. Transportation, our full-time driver is paid through the town, and our part-time driver, the state grant is paying his salary. If you ask me what would be my another need, I would say to fill the position that's open. Does that answer your question?
It does. Now I have a follow-up question. What is that position that's still open?
The position is actually a position of a services coordinator. She came to us in 2010, I think, but she has left for medical reasons, and I would like to reinvent that position because we go for a lot of grants, and there is a lot of grant that has to be reported every month. And there are other services like we do taxes for people. We have shine counselors, that health counselors who come. So a lot of things that we need to keep under one book, so one person can know what the appointments are. And also, like I do all the grants. But right now, I think I need someone who can do the monthly reports and give me the reports so I can, it will be less overwhelming for me, and I can go for more grants. So we are still trying to make that position. Of course, we are not hiring right now, but once we have the money and we have the time, we would go for that position and fill it with things we need.
Well, I hear from residents all the time about how they would like for this town to be more robust in its ability to apply for and win grants. So I certainly can appreciate the need for that, and I think it would be well supported in the town. When we have the budget to afford that to you, I will be so grateful. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Shamila, thank you very much for your work. You've done a tremendous job as the director back when it was the Council on Aging and now when it's Elder Affairs. You've been consistently excellent, and I want to thank you for your work. Just on the transportation side of things, you were really effective in getting grants for funding of vans. Do you still have the van that you bought when I was chief of staff, or has that been replaced?
Will you pardon me? Say that. Can you repeat the question?
Do you still have the van that you got through the grant that when I was chief of staff, or have you had a chance to replace it?
And then we had another van after you went to Norwell. And now we are actually, because Frank is telling me that van is kind of getting a little rusty. This was only a 2020 van. So I am looking into the Department of Transportation when they will have the grant cycle open. I think it's fall. Okay. So I'll go for that. And also, we have a small Nissan Quest, which saves gasoline, and for some of our older folks, it's easy for them to slide in with their walkers. So with some earmark money and some grant funding, I hope to find a small minivan. So because our Nissan Quest is also getting rusty. So yes, I am going to go look for more transportation money.
All right, thank you. And my second question is for the Director of Finance. Why is the labor custodian line in this budget and not in facilities?
I can answer that. Actually, he's labeled, but that's our van driver.
Okay.
That's our van driver, so he is in our budget, but that's how he's considered. He's the W3C.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Reynolds.
Shamila,
Thank you.
it's, I look forward to every year. You and I seem to be having conversations a long time, along with Ms. McGrath as well. So, my question for you is on the administrative and clerical line, you have taken a cut of $20,638. Is that associated in any way with this other position?
Yes,
Okay, so that person is not getting paid, or?
it's a vacant. That position is
So-
vacant.
So that person who went out on a medical is no longer employed?
She's no longer
Got
employed,
it.
yes.
Thank you. All right, that's,
So that's why we took about all the money we needed from that position, and hopefully when the time comes, that position will be. And this position is also partly paid through the state grant.
Got
It's
it.
just not town money. But yes, the clerical discrepancy you see is the money taken from that.
okay, so that individual's salary was partly paid for by the town budget?
Partly paid by the town and partly by the grant.
Great, thank you. All right. I am concerned a little bit about, I think that it is a great service to have these trips. You talked about the shopping trips once a week, et cetera, things like that, where folks get, they get dependent upon that assistance, if you will, right, in this particular case. And that's a little thing in life, but to somebody who doesn't have transportation, it's a big thing. for
It
them
is
to-
a big thing,
Right, to
yes.
be able to get to the store. Is there any, so have you taken a cut in this budget, in the transportation line item?
The cut was about, I think we had gasoline money we needed.
So that's what,
So-
right, that's what I wanted to ask you,
Yes.
is that, so the transportation is covered in your gasoline money. And I do see gasoline,
And
well, equipment and maintenance, you've actually gone up just a little bit, very slightly,
Very slightly, yeah.
$185. And I think, is that the only line item that we have? But I think what the point here would be is that the price of gasoline is higher this year.
Yes.
Okay? And so you're at the mercy, really, of how many how many trips that you can actually afford.
yeah.
Afford. Okay. I'm just thinking out loud here a little bit myself about any opportunity for you to receive gifts from the community as well. If someone chose to raise money for you and to earmark it towards a gasoline budget that would enable that program to be continued and consistent.
Actually, we do. First of all, this is, of course, donation. People, I mean, we call it a fee, but it is donation because a lot of people can't afford to pay that. So, like to come to the senior center, we'll charge $3 round trip. To go to the grocery store, we will charge, again, it's a donation, charge $3. So those money, we actually earmark it because it goes to the accounting, and it is earmarked as rides. And when we, actually in the past, we have used that money to buy gasoline. If you remember, gasoline was almost close to $5. We use a lot of money, and even we dip into our state grant. That's why we are lucky to have the state grant. We dip into things when gasoline and lighting, and we can't pay water and sewer. We do pay it from the state grant.
Okay. Terrific. You've given me some ideas that I think that I could pursue, but I don't have anything further for you. And again, I join the others who have consistently praised the work that you do and the quality of work that you do and the caring that you do in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I actually want to add something. Someone from the state, long time ago, I used to work with him. He one day told me, Sharmila, we are the silent public safety. And if you come to our building, you will see people who would have been lonesome, who would have been depressed. And I've seen many, many people come after losing their loved ones. They come here, we bring them because they can't drive, and slowly they start doing exercise or have a cup of coffee, join the men's group, or do some jewelry making, but I have seen how people have transformed. People who have lost a lot of things in their life, they come to our place. It takes time, but that's why when he said we are the silent public safety, I believe that. Because some people who could have withered away in their houses come to us and they find a new life. And we feel very happy that we can do that. And I am here almost now 17 plus, going into 18 years. And my kids sometimes ask me, Ma, are you still going to be there? The only reason I'm here is because I do love the job and I have a wonderful staff. As you know, we don't get that much money in our salaries, but people just love their job. And we have some nice people to support us, like Hank Joyce. So, you know, we have a lot of mentors and guidances.
I would agree with everything you said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I don't think we could end on a better note than that, if anybody has any questions, because that was a lovely sentiment, and I will take that one, carry that one with me. So thank you so much, Director Biswas.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, and thank you, Mr. Joyce, for sticking with us tonight. Have a good night. And thank you, now we have Mary Beth McGrath and Russ Forsborg. Thank you for staying around. I know we're getting on to 2 hours, and we appreciate you being here this evening. So this is our licensing and inspections and health departments. Did you want to open with anything, Director McGrath? Great.
Chairman Barrica. My name is Mary Beth McGrath, and accompanying me tonight is Russell Forsberg. He's our Inspector of Buildings. And Russ has been and continues to be instrumental in not only helping to prepare the budget, but also in department operations. The Building and Health Division, or Department of Municipal Licenses and Inspections, consists of the Building Division, the Health Division, the Substance Use Prevention Program, and our Public Health Nursing Division. We also act as liaisons to the Board of Health, as well as the Commission on Disabilities. The department staff consists of myself as the director, the Inspector of Buildings, which is Mr. Forsberg, our ADA coordinator and code compliance officer, Inspector of Wires, Inspector of Plumbing Gas, 2 health code enforcement officers, our public health nurse, and our substance use prevention coordinator, so 10 employees. We do have 1 vacant local building inspector position. We also engage with alternate inspectors to help with coverage, that being a local building inspector who also serves as our sealer of weights and measures, as well as an alternate electrical inspector and an alternate plumbing and gas inspector. We also were fortunate within the last year to be awarded a drug-free community, or DFC grant, and we do have a DFC grant coordinator that now works within our department. 2 projects that we're currently working on within the department, which we're very excited about and a long time coming. We are in the process of upgrading our permit software. We were fortunate enough to apply for and receive an Executive Office of Administration and Finance Community Compact Informational Technology Grant. As you may, most of you on this committee are aware, for the last several years, I've been putting capital requests in to upgrade software, and with the many needs of the town, that's not something that I was successful in receiving. So we really pushed hard to look for a grant to be able to fund this project, because it is a valuable tool to the department in bringing in revenues, and also making sure that the software, the last time the software was implemented in 2015. So it is, in the eyes of information technology, very outdated, and there were grave concerns about security features that were with the current program. As well, we are in the process, kind of dovetailing with the software upgrades to both building and health. We are reviewing our permit fee schedules so that can be, any changes in the scheduling can be implemented when the new software is implemented, both on the health side and the building division side. So those are some exciting things that we're really looking forward to. The health division software upgrade is being built out now, and we hope that can go live on or around July 1st. And then after that, they're going to start building out the building division software with hopes that that will be rolled out in the fall. So, and Russ and I are here to assist with any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Director McGrath. I would be happy to open up to my colleagues on the committee for any questions. Councillor Moran?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mayor Beth, thank you for your work. Thank you for your years in the position and the work that you've done to maintain licensing and inspections at a high level. Russ, I was a selectman when you were appointed. That's how long you've been in this, and thank you for your work as well. I'd like to just go over the line in the licensing administration budget for the inspectors in the enforcement division. I'm sorry, the inspectors, $370,597. Could you tell me what that covers? How many inspectors there are again, building and the others?
Absolutely. So we have the inspector of buildings, which is Mr. Forsberg. His salary is at...
And previously, if I can stop, there were more than one. There was more than one building inspector.
Correct. In 2009, we had 4.
Correct.
And as of this date, we have 1. We do have an alternate who assists Mr. Forsberg in supplementing the inspectional program, which is very difficult to maintain. Going from 4 inspectors that were full-time to 1 full-time inspector and an alternate inspector that's able to assist us after their full workday in another community has been quite difficult. So,
okay.
I'll go line by line if you'd like me to.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So the inspector building position, bringing that in at $104,514.30. And then we have our inspector of wires position at $89,951.25. We have our inspector of plumbing and gas position at $82,386.51. We have the vacant local building inspector position, which is funded, at $87,744.48. We also have $6,000, which is casual, that covers covering the alternate inspectors.
Okay. So is there an intention to fill that second position?
Yes, there is.
Okay, that's good.
That's always been the intention.
Okay, and you've had difficulty in finding candidates, or?
We have, and I'll have Mr. Forsberg speak to the difficulties we've had in hiring someone for the position.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's kind of a 3-phase problem that we've been experiencing. The state has raised the requirements or qualifications that they will allow. I'll just, by way of example, if someone wants to become a building inspector and they don't already have state certification, they have to apply to take the examinations before the state. In years past, they've been somewhat more liberal in terms of their acceptance of potential candidates for those positions. Of late, they've kind of tightened up those requirements. They want to see a more broad-based type of experience for potential candidates. The second problem that we're having is, quite frankly, is where, in terms of competitiveness in the marketplace, everyone is looking for these inspectors. COVID did a number to the industry. We had a lot of people who were reaching the age of retirement at that time and elected not to continue on those positions. And I mean, I can tell you that we will get from the state, we'll be getting vacancy positions on a weekly basis for other communities looking for it. And quite frankly, when we're looking at this, we're not as competitive as some of these other communities in terms of the salary. That's been the biggest stumbling block thus far, is that, again, it's not, and this is not unusual, it's not, I'm sorry, it's not specific to this.
I think that's fair, but to go back to the point, when we had 4, is it fair to say that the volume of permit applications and work that the inspectors performed was similar, if not lesser, than what we're facing now?
I would suggest you're correct in that. Braintree has benefited from the fact that we really have never seen a slowdown in work, even during the COVID time period. So yeah, the level has been consistent, if not a little bit more so than in years past when we had greater staffing.
So the level or the vacancies that we've had, or the reduction in staff that we've had, creates, one, an economic development issue because you're not able to respond to permit applications and inspections involved in construction as timely as you would with more staff. And secondly, it has a safety impact because you're not as free to do inspections to make sure that certain conditions are met and adequate as well.
Correct. And the other thing that I want to introduce too is the fact that our staffing level is well known to the construction community. And with that being said, it's much like, if you had a town with one police officer in it, and criminal activity might be higher because they know there's only one person to go around and try and police this sort of situation. So again, that's been
regardless of motivation, people follow the path of least resistance, and that will be to avoid regulation if they can, and so that is a concern. So I had one more question, and I've lost it because I'm so concerned about the fact that we don't have enough people to do inspections. But if I remember it, I'll come back to it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No problem. Councilor Reynolds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome. Good to see you guys again, both of you. I echo some of the comments that were made previous here about, the services that you provide our community. You're certainly a huge example, or a very significant example, of doing a lot with very little. The resources that you have, you're delivering, I think, above and beyond. As in boxing circles, you punch above your weight because of the fact that of all the things that you need to do that have to be inspected. Is the world perfect? It is not, that is for certain, but I appreciate the effort and the work that you guys do and the results. So I just want to ask a couple of questions here just to make sure that I heard correctly the staffing you currently have and then what is actually funded in the budget itself. I would agree also that we do need more inspectors because of the fact that Mr. Forsberg, that was a great analogy, right? But it was apt, right? So public health nurse, we know that position is filled. We know that health, we have one or two.
2 health inspectors.
So, all right, so you have 2 that are filled there. That's a full complement. Your substance abuse coordinator is there. Your ADA coordinator is in place. Mm-hmm. Under licensed inspectors and code enforcement, this is line 24105, and this is specifically that speaks to the building, right?
Correct.
So we have only one.
We have 1 building inspector, a full-time building inspector, and you're
we're looking at him.
Yes.
Right. So you do have, and I'm just looking at your line items here. You have 370,596 spot 54. Is that in your budget?
That's the total.
Of the entire budget. I stand corrected. The inspector total budget, you're listing 3 different positions here. One of 89.9, one of 104, one of 82.
Right, so we have 89,951.25 is our inspector of wires.
Okay.
The 104,514.30 is our inspector of buildings.
Yeah.
82,386.51 is our inspector of plumbing and gas.
Yeah.
We have $6,000 for the casual line item, which would assist with paying the alternate inspectors.
Sure.
And then the vacant local building inspector position is $87,744.48.
And that's the local building inspector.
The vacant position, correct.
Got it. All right. Thank you. Yes.
No, we are intending to address, to review, and we know that this has been unsuccessful in filling because we're not right now able to offer this at a really kind of a market competitive position. So I think in full transparency for the committee, by extrapolation, this budget isn't enough. So we're going to work with Chris Chips, the director of HR, to look at what's needed to be able to get this position re-advertised. There is a hiring freeze generally, but we felt very quickly, I think within days after the budget guidance was issued, Mary Beth and Russ came and met with me and made a very compelling case, particularly because there's a lot of revenue associated with this, and the economic development pieces that Councilor Moore had mentioned and others have noted. So I think we should put a marker in the sand here that this budget actually is intended to fund the intent to fill this position, but as we go forward with this and hopefully successfully fill it, we will probably have to deal with this. It's a small, I suppose, in the grand scheme of things, but it is something that's notably going to need to be addressed.
I appreciate that additional commentary on your part. And I think that having that money, even though, as you're saying, competitiveness-wise, you're really not able to compete at the level you'd want to compete to fill that position. I think having some funding in there is certainly a start. And, you know, we hope, I've got confidence in the focus of the administration that the way that we're operating right now is a more realistic manner in which we're operating from. We're right from the get-go. There's very little, if any, wiggle room, but it's part of a plan here that to build on top of that. And I think, as others have spoken and Council Moran just recently said, that this goes to revenue generation. This is a case of having to spend money to make money. So, and it's hand in glove, I think, with what's going on, as you said, Director, about the economic development position as well, next door. So, thank you. I appreciate that, you know, your candor and the efforts that you put in every day. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor. Are you all set, Counselor Flaherty? Okay. I do want to acknowledge that Counselor Maglio did send in a series of questions that have been responded to in writing, so thank you very much for getting those to us. And I will ask Counselor Maglio to follow up with anything additional, if there is anything. I have one question, and to echo the sentiments of my colleagues, I feel like we've had the same conversation since I've been on the council, that we know that this department is woefully understaffed and woefully underfunded and incredibly important to the well-being, health, and safety of our community. So thank you for doing as much as you do with as little as you have. One question, the substance use coordinator. My recollection is that that was funded through grants from the state, that salary, is that not the case?
Initially, I believe that, Mr. Reynolds may remember this, initially I believe that there was some funding that was provided by the state.
I thought it was
I think it was about $125,000, that was quite a number of years ago, but then it evolved into where that was under the mayor's office. The substance use prevention program used to be under the mayor's office, and then several years into it, my department took it over, and at that point, there was an established budget created for it in which it was funded through the town.
So is that salary plussed up with earmarks from the state, or not captured in the, or am I off the mark there?
It's funded through the general fund.
Okay.
And if there is earmarked funding that is provided in the course of a fiscal year in which there's still funding left over, then oftentimes what we're trying to do is apply some of that, anything that's left over in earmarked funding, towards the salary position if we're able to. I can't always guarantee that, though.
Okay, no, that clarifies it, and thank you for that explanation. And then just a small question on this new software and permitting software that we're getting. That's fantastic. Is that going to apply to the farmers market and the farmers market vendors?
Yeah.
So is that, you said it's not going to be ready until July 1st, though?
It was supposed to be ready in the middle of June, but we've had the software companies continuing to work out some issues, and it looks like we're looking at around July 1st, on or about right now. That's not preventing anyone, though, from submitting application through the current system, and we'll continue to process all of that. that is ongoing. So there's hopefully going to be a very smooth transition from the current programming to the new programming.
Okay, so nothing's being held up for the farmer's market, it's just going to be a software change on the back end? Awesome, that's
We hope
great
that it will
news.
be, in the long run, a more simplistic
Right,
process for our clients who are applying for permits, both on the building and the health division side.
well, hopefully that will prove to be the case.
We're very excited about it.
Yeah. Any other questions from committee members? Counselor Moran, you remembered.
Yeah, I remember. So I just wanted to note that the permitting software that you're using now, having gone through, it's such an improvement over what was there before, having made improvements over the last 3 decades to the house that I own. The efficiency of the way that my application was handled, the response was quick, and I was able to do it, within 2 days. We were fixing a roof, and everything was submitted. It was easy to submit. It was easy to get a response. It was very efficient, and I wanted to compliment you. And if you're upgrading it, I hope it's as good.
We appreciate that.
So thank you.
As you can imagine, with the shortage on the building side, going from 2009 to 4 building inspectors to present with 1 full-time inspector and an alternate who assists out in the field, Mr. Forsberg has really had to prioritize from top to bottom in what is being done. One of the top priorities, of course, are permit applications that are coming through, they're revenue generating, and also the inspections that would accompany that as they're called in. So he's really worked very, very hard to make sure that is happening. We're working with our alternate on a routine basis, daily basis, as a matter of fact, to try and assist with coverage on inspections. So I really would like to plug my staff. I know I try and take every opportunity to do that anyways, but I just have a phenomenal staff who we've all come together out of need and because that's just how we've always worked. But more importantly, of late with the staff shortages, out of need, and we're all assisting each other to try and make sure that the operations continue without any hiccup and that we're providing the services that we can on a routine basis to our clients.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything you guys do, and please pass along our gratitude to your staff members who got to go home and have dinner tonight with their families. Thank you for staying with us this evening.
I did want to mention that I do have a revolving account. I didn't know if he was taking that up.
Yes, I think that's probably what Clerk Semino was just going to mention to me. Thank you. Are there any questions on the revolving account from counselors? I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, that concludes our old business for the evening. With that, do we have a motion to, yes, thank you.
Vote on budget
Oh,
this
we need to vote on
evening.
CPC? I apologize.
Madam Chair, does it matter, should we, Sharmila just reminded me, she has a revolving
She
account
also
as
has a
well.
revolving, if you have any question on hers as well.
No.
No, we're all set.
Yep, thank you. Okay, so I apologize and thank you for the procedural assistance. So 24021 we need to vote on?
Page 3, correct.
Okay. All right, so 24021, Mayor, is the FY 2025 budget for the Community Preservation Committee, or take up any action relative thereto. Do we have a motion? And it's 5 different motions.
Okay, I'm ready.
Thank you. Councilor Moran, take it away.
Madam Chair, in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 44B, Section 5, and the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, I move that the sum of $125,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund to the Community Housing Reserve for acquisition, creation, preservation, or support of community housing, or the rehabilitation or restoration of community housing that's acquired or created as provided in Mass General Law, Chapter 44B, Section 5.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, in accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44B, Section 5, and the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, I move that the sum of $125,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund to the open space reserved for the acquisition, creation, or preservation of open space or the rehabilitation or restoration of open space that is acquired or created as provided in Mass General Law, Chapter 44B, Section 5.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 44B and Section 5, and the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, I move that the sum of $125,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund for the Historic Resources Reserve for the acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation, or restoration of historic resources as provided in Mass General Law, Chapter 44B, Section 5.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 44B, Section 5, and the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, I move that the sum of $754,160 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund to the Community Preservation Budgeted Reserve as provided in Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44B, Section 5.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 44B, Section 5, and the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, I move that the sum of $59,430 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund to the fiscal year 2025 Administrative Operating Fund as provided in Mass General Laws, Chapter 44B, Section 5, said funds to be expended under the direction of the Community Preservation Committee and by the Director of Planning and Community Development.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilor Moran. 24022 table. Okay.
24020 and 24022.
Thank you, Clerk Semino. All right. Do we have a motion to table orders 24020 and 24022?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous. All right, that concludes our budget hearing for this evening. Tomorrow, we will be taking up the school department's budget. I want to say thank you, as always, to BCAM, Bill Needham. I believe we have Martha with us this evening for televising, and we will be back here tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. This meeting is adjourned.